Yep. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the June 14th session of the PMI Western Idaho Chapter Lunch and Learn. I'm your host, Brian Russell. We have George Lewis and Cheryl Bishop joining us as co-host, if you will. We have a two-part session today. In the first part, for about the first 15 minutes, we're going to hear a video from Lisa DiTullio. She's going to talk to us about the project coach. Just a plug for this is it's a video from the Project Bytes library, which as a PMI chapter member, we all have free access to that Project Bytes library. Highly encourage you, if you haven't checked it out, to check it out. There's a lot of videos in there that are short form, a little bit longer form, a lot of reading material as well. So we'll be hearing from Lisa DiTullio about the project coach. And then joining us at probably about 15 minutes after, we'll hear from Susan Schwartz. Susan is going to talk with us about building amazing teams using your emotional intelligence. Just a heads up in regards to the video that the video and audio might be slightly out of sync, so hopefully it's not too distracting, but I wanted to just make you aware of that. During this session, use the Q&A, so once Susan gets on, is presenting, use the Q&A. She'll be asking the audience questions, so we'll use the Q&A for the responses. And then the chat's also available as well if you're running into any type of challenges or issues that George or Cheryl can address. So with that, let's get started with Lisa DiTullio and the project coach. George, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Brian, thanks. And just one quick comment. This disconnect on the lip syncing for audio and video is probably an artifact of how we're having to do this on Hopin, not inherent with Project Bytes. So don't be scared away from Project Bytes if we do have that. We've had to jump through some hoops in order to get both at the same time within Hopin. So anyway, let's see. I have to share a screen. Hopefully people will start to see that pop, and then I'll start the video.
All right. So far, so good, George.
Okay.
Everyone.
Sorry. I'll click it twice.
Isn't a fad? Today's post-pandemic environment is telling us that we are going to continue to work in high velocity settings, rapid constant change, and most of this suggests that business coaching has a real position in how we stretch and develop others on our teams, particularly project teams. Why is this important? Well, the World Economic Forum has come out with a suggestion that 1 billion people will need to be reskilled by 2030. And the PMI just recently also released a report on talent that suggests in that same period of time, 25 million new project professionals will need to be in place. That suggests that we need to upskill staff in order to meet this demand. And this is where project coaching becomes so incredibly valuable as far as making sure we keep up with this. For project managers, coaching is fundamentally an essential leadership in order for us to continue to ensure that our teams stretch and develop. So how do we do this? How do we have the time to do this while we still get our work done? Well, let's start the story at sea. I am a rowing, open ocean rower. This is a picture of one of my crews. And in this crew, you see 4 of us facing towards the right of the picture with 1 woman facing us as the crew. That's Abby. She's our leader. She's our coxswain of the boat. Before we take a journey on any day of the week, Abby is in control. And before we even get in the boat, she assesses our trail for that day. She assesses the wind, the weather, the tide, the current, the skills that are in the boat to ensure that our journey is both successful as well as safe. Abby oozes with authority, quick decision maker, and she pushes us hard when we think we're at the brink of exhaustion, particularly when we're enduring a very tough and competitive race. She rallies us. She keeps us in the game. Open ocean rowing is one of the most exhilarating and one of the most unexpected sports I've ever encountered. And even like our projects, we can plan them to the penny. And there's always something that comes out under our way that is least expected and challenges our skills. As a rowing coach, Abby typically tells us what to do. She teaches us so that we become faster, more agile, more competitive, more stronger, more focused. That is not the coaching technique that we're going to be talking about today. So what is workplace coaching, you might ask? The most simplest definition that I can come up with is a conversation with purpose. Workplace coaches, their role and their objective is to create meaningful learning environments that help people in their sphere, in their business sphere, grow and develop. For project coaches, it's about enabling our project team members to reach the next level of development, of performance, or whatever it is that they need in order to be successful and deliver what's expected, which, as we know, that expectation is just going to continue to go up and up and up. What we do is we ask questions to create this environment. We don't tell them what to do. How do we do it? Well, with a really simple approach. The coaching technique that we're going to talk about today requires us to kind of change our mindset and both our behavior. Rather than being the horse leading the cart, as a coach, we reposition ourselves to be behind the coachee. And we place the coachee in front to ensure that they have both a successful and a safe journey. And we support their ride by enabling their capabilities, but they lead the way, not us. This is no longer a command and control model of old-fashioned leadership where we told people what to do. We allow them to be empowered, we let them go after it, and if they fail, we help them to get up and go ahead and do it again. It's less about telling, and it's more about challenging. It requires our full attention. It requires curiosity, and it requires extraordinary listening skills. It's about asking rather than telling. It's not about judging. And it's about facilitating development so we can see our team members reach the next level of success. For some of us, this behavior might be dramatically different than what we're used to. But the good news is it can be easily learned. So wait, isn't coaching and mentoring the same thing? No. And yet, there's so frequently I hear these terms interchanged on a regular basis. Mentors are typically those individuals that we identify for ourselves that have tenure, experience, success, knowledge. They've been doing something, they were in a role longer than we have. And we rely on that knowledge and experience and we draw from it in our conversations and relationships with the mentor-mentoree so that we can use that information and their experience to drive and fuel our own career aspirations. Mentor-mentoree relationships can be longer in duration. They don't need to meet regularly, but they are traditionally focused on career and personal growth. Coaches, on the other hand, typically are more short-term engagements, discussions, short-term performance opportunities, short-term opportunities for new accomplishments, new challenges, new successes. And what's great about it is once you get an opportunity to get a feel of asking questions rather than telling, you don't need any subject matter expertise to be a good coach. In fact, I would contend the less we know about the topic that we're talking about, the better we are as a coach. Less influence and less opportunity for us to tell or to teach. So what do we need to do in order to be a successful coach? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to embrace the diversity that is represented on our project teams. And as we all know, this can come in all different flavors, whether it is their backgrounds, their disciplines, cultures, generational differences. And we leverage that everything that our team members bring to the table, individual, to bring collective power in order to deliver complex project and program work. Successful coaches, they need the different voices. They understand that everyone has a different personality, and they are going to look at each individual as exactly that, their own person. There's a woman by the name of Leah Georges. She is a social psychologist who has spent the most of her career in studying generational differences. She's really fascinating to listen to. She contends at some point, generational differences don't even exist. We're so busy slapping labels on people, it blurs our judgment of others. She has the most powerful and yet simple statement or quote that I think of all the time before I sit in the coach's seat. Meet them in their onlyness. Individuals. But remember, it has to be a joint venture between you as a coach and your coachee. So what triggers a coaching session, you might ask? Well, typically it's driven by feedback. That's one of the most common opportunities for how we will engage in a coaching session. And usually it's about when we need to redirect someone. Redirecting feedback is that constructive feedback. When we need to give them information based on observation or feedback from others on someone's performance. We want to change their behavior. We want to redirect them to something better, something that's more successful. Not to be confused with reinforcing feedback, where that's equally as important, but that's when we're really giving people positive reinforcement. Job well done. Keep it up. That's great. The constructive feedback piece of it is one that we tend to avoid because it's uncomfortable. And there is particular challenges associated with this when we need to give constructive feedback to our high performers. Why is that? Because most high performers, the benchmarks tell us they are unrealistic in what they really bring to the table. And as humans, they are actually only going to agree with that constructive feedback if it matches their own self-image of who they are and what they're capably able of doing. So when we need to provide feedback that's constructive, awkward, difficult, but we have to do it, the chances are that our high performers are going to have a harder time accepting it. P.S. If they don't accept it, you can't continue to coach them. We typically accept consistent feedback to who we are and how it will happen. The second opportunity is when someone comes to us seeking our advice, our guidance. They're struggling with a situation. They want us to tackle a new problem, new challenge. That's another way in which we can turn that around, and rather telling them or teaching them, we can actually guide them through a coaching session to empower them to be comfortable and eager and confident to take it on their own with our support. And the last opportunity of how you can end up in a coaching conversation is really just serendipity. You just simply ask someone, hey, how things are going? And the next thing you know, before you have it, the conversation is taking down a pathway where they are revealing something that they're really interested in. And before you know it, you can put your coach's hat and you can guide them through that empowerment. The number one skill, you must at all times listen. No, I mean, really listen. When we have to deliver feedback that's difficult and challenging, Mary Beth O'Neill, who has written a great book about executive coaching, truly contends that the more difficult the feedback that we need to deliver to people, the more sensitivity and the more humanistic we need in that delivery. She has a great opening quote in these situations that I find myself referring to a lot because it meets my style of conversation. And it enables me to open the door with dignity and respect when it's a conversation that I know is going to be difficult to have. And this is that opening conversation. She has all sorts of other things that you can find in her book, but it just gives us that reminder that even though we don't want to deliver the feedback, we need to. Let's open the door, get the dialogue going, figure out what we can do. So how do you start with a coaching conversation? Well, I'm going to refer to an oldie but goodie model, the GROW model. It was developed by Sir John Whitmore back in the late 80s. And it was originally a model that was designed predominantly to support strategic thinking, goal setting. It also can be workable, and it can be a great and helpful guide for those of us who want to enter into a coaching conversation, but we're not quite sure how to do it. And every phase of the GROW model gets us to where we need to get to with our coaching. So let's take a look and see what that means. In the goal setting phase, this is where that early opportunity is to really just try to understand what's the topic. What are we going to talk about? Whether I'm opening the door or they're opening the door, we need to make sure that we're aligned. What do we want to get out of this conversation and what are we going to talk about? And all of these questions can help to be that door opener. I look at these questions and I think they work just fine, but it doesn't necessarily meet my conversation style. They're a little too formal for me. So for this particular area,
hey, George,
open sentence is simply this. Open the door.
Yeah, George, if you could stop the video.
Going. And then the more that I ask questions, the more the...
Hello, afternoon. Good afternoon, Susan. I see you, but I cannot hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. And Susan, if you could just get ready and get your presentation shared, and then I will do a quick introduction for you.
For those that want to hear the end of the video, by the way, go to Project Bites.
So let me welcome Susan Schwartz. Susan is going to share with us a presentation about build amazing teams using your emotional intelligence. Susan is a leadership and management coach who transforms expert professionals into excellent leaders. Using emotionally intelligent tools, she equips new managers with relationship building and effective communication skills to become excellent leaders who create amazing collaborative teams. Susan published Creating a Greater Whole, a project manager's guide to becoming a leader. This book unlocks the not-so-secrets of how aspiring managers can become strong leaders. So with that, let me welcome Susan to the stage, and we'll hear about building amazing teams. A reminder that we do have the Q&A on the right-hand menu. Susan will be engaging with the team, the audience throughout the presentation, and that'll be the place to respond to questions as they come up. Susan, it's all yours, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. A part of that introduction, thank you very much to Brian and Sharon and George for helping me with our dry run yesterday and get the technicalities down pat. I really appreciate the invitation. And what isn't included in my introduction is for several years, I was on the governance board of the Washington, D.C. PMI chapter. And so as we talk about building amazing teams and using your emotional intelligence, the best way to get the most out of PMI and practice your emotional intelligence is to volunteer with your chapter. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of jobs and there's small ones and large ones. So I can only encourage you to become a volunteer.
Thank you for the plug. And our chapter can always use the help.
That's right. And that's how you're going to get the most out of this. And just even beginning, when we talk about emotional intelligence, the first step, just like volunteering for your PMI with your PMI chapter, is to pay attention. And that's really the very first step when we talk about emotionally intelligent leaders. Now, I'm not sure many people know about Daniel Goleman, and he wrote, the first groundbreaking work called Emotional Intelligence that set the parameters and defined things. And at that point in the 90s, when it was first published, I was designing integrated voice and data systems. I was incredibly technical. I was flipping TCP/IP bits. And along the way, I realized other people did that a lot better than me. And I went over to manage the projects as opposed to, focusing on the technical side. And I discounted it because I thought feelings, you're not supposed to have feelings. It's all about technology. Well, you know what? Business is really about the people, not the technology. It's people that drive businesses. And what I've learned is that emotional intelligence is, the definition says managing your feelings, but I'd like to extend that and say it's managing your reactions to your feelings. I mean, you're going to feel something in your gut, something happens. You cannot control anybody else. You cannot control that somebody said something ridiculous. You can't control that somebody did something stupid or forgot something. But you can control how you react to that. And so throughout the session today, I focus, my personal focus, and it could be because I've been a project manager and we're very practically focused. It's our job to bring projects in on time and under budget. We don't have time to move our focus away. But emotional intelligence helps you to maintain that focus and create the outcomes that you want to have happen. And so that's why when we look at feelings and reactions, it is neurological, it's neuroscience. Some of you may have heard about the dragon brain. It's right back here. And when somebody hits your hot button, you feel your ears starting to steam up, and they always say the same thing, and they're just ridiculous, and you're just tired of it. That goes to your dragon brain right here. And in the neuroscience world, they call that the amygdala. And then it moves through the middle part of your limbic brain. And this is where somebody says something, it sets you off, and you say something. And just as you say that, you want to pull the words back in your mouth. You like realize you needed a filter and you forgot to use it. And so that's what happens is when you have the time to filter it through your logic, through that your limbic system, then you go into your neocortex. And that neocortex is the logic part of your brain. And that helps you sort it out. It gives you a filter. You reply with a response that won't embarrass yourself, that will move the situation forward. And that's what I like to call the heart logic action. And when I say gut, I put heart and gut together into one because it's what you feel inside. And if any of you work with some yoga mantra breathing, and we talk about chakras, the heart and the gut are right next to each other, only hearts are much better looking than intestines. So you feel something in your gut and you just know it's right, but you can't put any words into it. That's when you go up to your brain and you think it through, and then you take action. At other times, somebody tells you something and you're not really sure about it. You have this very odd feeling about it. And so you have to go back to your brain and kind of fix it. So again, once your heart and your brain are in sync, you can take action. And the reason the lungs are here is your best tool, the tool that will help you become the most intelligent project leader you can be, is breathing. Whenever you feel that little, dragon brain starting to rise its head, take 2 deep breaths. Seriously, just breathe in, breathe out, just a couple seconds. You don't have to even make this big show of it, but it's going to get oxygen to your brain. So you're thinking more clearly. And it also gives space because other people are going to calm. They're going to feel your breath, even though you're not, just a calm breath. It's going to make a difference. And all of a sudden, they're going to take a breath. And the whole room can calm down so that you are thinking logically to take that action. Are there any questions yet, Brian and George, in the room, in the question area? All right. Well, let me ask you.
Yeah, there are none at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you. I figured you'd pop in. What do you all see when you see this picture? Do you see a stranger or do you see a colleague? Do you see that person walking away or coming towards us? And I use this in a class. I give a guest lecture at Georgetown University, and this always elicits great conversations because some people see the figure walking away and some people see the figure walking forward. But the important part, the reason I take a moment and hopefully sort of set a level here, is being a project manager is about creating an inclusive team where people can work together and become something greater than themselves. If there are 12 people on your team and all 12 worked individually, they could do a good job. But you as the project manager, by bringing them together to engage them, are going to create a great team. And that's where we'll be talking about how do you create that engagement? How do you make sure people are included in the conversation? Because when people are not included, they are not involved, guess what? They disengage. And even if they don't physically walk away, mentally they've walked away. And then what happens to your project? You get fired because you're not managing it anymore. The project is managing you. So it's really important to look at this, that emotional intelligence is not just a noun. I started talking about reacting, that it's people that drive business, not technology. It's all about behaviors and choices. So when we look at an emotionally intelligent project manager, you're someone who observes the situation. You're going to evaluate the options using information that you know from experience and possibly what you see right there in the situation. And then you're going to choose action. And that's the action that you want to see happen for a constructive outcome. And I'm hoping that you're going to choose that action that will bring your team together and strive for collaboration, so that when you're solving that problem, you're going to get all these wonderful perspectives. And somebody will say, oh my gosh, when I was working on this job, this happened. And then somebody else will go, you're right. And then in another time we did this. And so through that troubleshooting, brainstorming, you can come to a really great outcome. So it's about observing a situation, evaluating your options, and then choosing the action that you want to take for creating that positive outcome. So I use a method when I'm coaching, and I run some workshops where I utilize a 5-level, that's called an EQI, Emotional Quotient 2.0 assessment. Essentially, it's got 5, not 10 elements, 5 elements. And the very first one, from a project management standpoint, I'll go through the specifics. The first one, where I have alignment here, officially it's called self-perception. And it's how you view your role and how other people view you. And there's a lot of detail, but for our purposes, when we're looking at from a project manager's perspective, this is the project mission. This is the outcome. What do you want to have happen? And what is the role you have and everybody else in your team? And you're hoping that they all align so you get to that end, on time, under budget, and quality of scope is met. Now, if you all think you're going in different angles or think you have different roles, well, you're going to be at crosshairs, and you won't finish that project appropriately. The second one is communication. And that's how you communicate among everybody on the project. And it's really paying attention to assure that the message that you intended is received by that party. Because you can't communicate the same message using the same method to everyone. You have the stakeholders, you have your boss, there are people who are junior to you, call that managing up, managing down, and even more importantly, managing across. I like to call it the GPS of communication, because all of your peer project managers, if we're working on a large project, you're going to be begging, borrowing, and stealing resources from each other. Hopefully just the begging and borrowing. But all of that comes back into the communication element. And then that middle, the third one, is officially intrapersonal. I like to call it collaboration, because this third level is how you as a project manager bring everybody together to execute the project. That's how everybody works together. And then, of course, bad things just happen. And when we work on projects, they're usually about change. And change is stressful because it's new and bad things happen, and it's nobody's fault. How do you react? And how do you keep things calm so that everybody else is on that even keel? And finally, once the boat's righted, everybody's calm, you found the root cause, now you have to fix it. And that's where you get into decision making. And again, people they make decisions differently. I love, if you can't tell already, flip charts and sticky notes and jumping all around with color markers and very visual and what if and this and that. And there's high energy in the room among all of us. My husband's an engineer. And what he likes to do is there will be a group of them. They'll take 15 or 20 minutes and they each think through solutions that they think should be considered. And then they come together and talk about it very logically, calmly, and very just a whole different vibe in the room. At the end of the day, neither one is the right way. It's just recognizing that people do this differently. So depending on your team, you may want to assign different people, different projects, different challenges, and put all the Susans in one room, my husband's David, all the Davids in the other, and then maybe bring those one or two solutions together to discuss. Or what's happened a lot in the teams I've worked with is you pair people with complementary viewpoints. So you get someone like me who kind of thinks outside the box and sort of wildly, and then you get somebody who's calmer that'll keep me on track. So I'm going to push the calm engineer type person out of their comfort zone, and they're going to reel me back in. And that's what emotional intelligence is about, because there's not a bad way or a good way. It's not like 94 to 100 is an A. There's, in my model, 15 different parameters, and it's all relational. It's having that balance between the two and bringing the right people together who complement each other's skills really, really well. There's other presentations about bias. I have a good friend that says, if you have a brain, you have bias, because all of us have an unconscious bias that we need to get beyond. You can't have a project team of everybody just like you. Then you'll all end up with the same bias and the same weak spot. And again, the customer is not served. And that's probably the comment.
I love that perspective. I was going to say, Susan, I love that perspective. It's that diversity in how people think that ultimately land us on the best solutions, the best products.
Exactly right. And I'm just the two quick stories, and I'll go into these specifics. I just had business partners, and one of them told me they got along great, but they had this itch, and the itch, it just got, more and more friction. So they came and we were talking, and one person said they make decisions too quickly. And the other person said they make decisions too slowly. And we ran through the assessment, and it turned out that the entrepreneurial one, the one that was built more the business builder, the salesperson, they had very little impulse control. They would spit something out with a client there because they just wanted the business. And the other person was the operations manager, and they had to come through and make happen what the salesperson, promised. And so they're going, no, we don't have the people, we don't have the budget. And then sometimes the operations person would get in the weeds, and the entrepreneurial person was like, be quiet, they don't care. And I'm sure many of you have found yourself in that same boat. And what they realized, that they were just different types of people when it came to how much information you needed and what was the situation that made you comfortable. So they came up with a code word, and they'd say, I think it needs to be this type of analysis. So it calmed them in the moment. The client didn't know. It sounded very official. And they were able to do a quick sidebar, or say, this is a little more complicated. Can we make an appointment next week? And so that's where two people, for most of the business, they complemented each other. And just for this one instance, they just kind of itched. And my other one where I really believe where it shows the return on investment is, I come from DC. I was part of the federal government subcontracting space where there are a lot of IT providers. And somebody came through my workshop, and we were affiliated with a PMP prep program. He said, your course was my very favorite course. I said, well, thank you, but why? He said that he was going to fire his assistant. They were a federal government IT subcontractor where there's always a crisis. And he said, she just didn't get our business. I said, I don't understand. That sounds really serious that you're going to fire her. And he said, but after your workshop, I realized that people handle stress differently. So instead of firing her the next day, he went back. He said, well, I could fire her next week. She's not terrible. She's not stealing from me. And he watched her. And what he saw is that while he was, got the bad news, he screamed, he waved his arm, he said some choice phrases, she was very calmly going back to her desk, figuring out who could resolve the issue. She called that person. And by the time the president of this company had calmed down, realized who could fix it, he would say, call George. And by then, Marge had already called George, and she was much too diplomatic. She simply said yes. She didn't say, I already did that. So what he realized is she had already done that. And he realized the value she brought to his company. So he said, instead of firing her, I gave her a raise. Is that the best ROI? He would have lost a huge, huge employee. So sometimes it's just taking that breath and looking at a situation with a new framework from a new viewpoint. And that's where we are right here. How are you looking? How do you perceive your role? When you're in a client meeting, and your client could be an external client, or if you're within a big organization, you might be at an internal meeting, but I found my internal clients are much harder to manage than my external clients. So do you find yourself thinking about what you want to achieve or what your client needs to achieve? That's a mindset. And so if you can get out of yourself and focus on your client, and you get them, meet their needs, you'll be able to interweave what you need to get done. It's a matter of how you're listening and what you're hearing from them, or how much you are or not hearing. And that's where we move into communication.
That's a great point. Great point.
Oh,
all too often PMs were thinking about, I've got to get this schedule put together, or create a charter, rather than thinking about, well, what does my customer want? What's my customer need? Right. So thanks for the reminder. Good point.
Oh, thanks for the reinforcement. And I should say, if you need to get extra time in the project, come on, right? Everybody always thinks it can be done faster than it can. If you listen to what your client's saying and you recognize what's important for them, you can very often take it and turn it into a benefit for them. So if you're listening, and then you can frame your message to what they need to hear.
We have Brian that asked this question, another Brian. When people are wired a certain way, any suggestion on changing the mindset?
Well, you can't change anybody else, but you can try to reframe it by asking those probing questions. You can ask questions that we call them the 5 W's. I don't know, in junior high school, we learned how to be journalists, and they say, ask these 5 questions. Part of that is when you're looking for the real story and that person is wired one way and you're wired another way. And of course, their way is the wrong way. I mean, we all have been through that, right? And I don't mean to be too flippant about that, but if you can ask questions and give them a chance to answer them, and asking open-ended, not yes or no, they may realize that they've missed a piece of that story. Or as you're asking those questions, you might realize that you didn't understand a piece of the story that they thought they were telling you. So by trying to create a conversation, by having those questions, will really help both sides. You, as the project manager, can understand what the other person's thinking, and the other person gets an opportunity to explain themselves, but they also get the opportunity to look at the situation from another perspective, not just theirs. Is that helpful?
I see a thumbs up, so we'll go with that.
Brian responded in the chat and said, perfect. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, I got to go faster. I know I get so excited and so involved because I find this so important. When you're bringing those teams together to execute, trust is the number one skill. I won't even ask you. I'm going to guess. Everybody, you should agree with me. But the question when it comes to trust is creating that trust is a two-way street. So as project managers, how often do you ask for help? Or perhaps you have people on the team that don't want to ask for help. It could be because they're afraid of looking stupid. It could be that they think that they said they could do it and they've run out of time and they're embarrassed to ask for help. Or the opposite, how often do you offer help? Are you afraid that if you help somebody, they will learn from you and perhaps get better than you are? So I think that part of a healthy team is watching how they help each other. How often do you ask for help? How often do you offer help? And of course, what you do when someone makes a mistake. It's a learning. Do you turn that failure into a learning moment? I'm in California. We talk about it failing up, taking that bad situation, learning from it, and then being able to move forward. Which gets us right into stress management and handling all that change. It's important that you recognize how you react when things don't go as planned. It's even more important for you to recognize how your team reacts. Because when bad things happen, the team looks to the person of authority to think or to how they should behave, to model that behavior. So how many of you, the secret that leaders don't tell each other is you're making it up as you go along. And your project team doesn't want to know that. You're going, holy crap, what am I going to do now? But they need you to see you breathing. That's where you breathe. And if you're breathing, they're going to breathe. And hopefully that stress, you'll get a solution and it would pass. When I had a huge 10,000 station voice and data system going in, I had 1 chocolate chip cookie stress, 2 chocolate chip cookie stress, and then I would stop eating. And so that's where you need to recognize the signs that you're getting a little overwhelmed. And do you need to let go? When I got to the point where I was going to stop eating, I needed to ask for help. I probably should have asked for help at the 2nd chocolate chip cookie. But, you need to recognize those signs so that you can also take care of yourself. You know, on the airplane where they say, put your oxygen mask on and then help the person next to you. There's a reason for that, because you don't want to be helping somebody else and then you mess up and you're not able to lead at that point. And then we get to the how do you handle difficult conversations? Yikes. Sometimes it really is tough, and you're going to ask your team to do things that they may not be totally comfortable. You might need to get them to do overtime. Somebody might need to try something they've never done before. But this is the question. Do you make decisions for people or with them? And again, that goes back to buy-in. That first, are you a stranger or a colleague? If people are just telling you what to do and you don't agree and you're not given any point of the conversation, what do? Do you just do the job? You're going to do it, and you don't care how well you do it. You're going to do C-level work because you don't care. You're mad. You don't understand, and they're just telling you. And I say this because we all have done that, right? But if you're part of that decision and you have to do the stupid, just rote job, you paid, whatever it needs to do, you have to smile and pass agendas out at your big stakeholder meeting. But if you understand why that's important, then you're going to hand out those agendas and really make an impression so they get a positive feeling for the project team. So if people understand, then they're going to provide buy-in. And once they buy in, they're going to become an ally and not an antagonist. So it's really important to help enable people to become those allies, because that's when they're confident to help you, as opposed to just being angry and wanting to trip you up. Which kind of gets to the next two. What do you do when someone says, because it's always been done that way? Think about it. Raise your virtual hand. When somebody says it's always been done this way and you're changing, and you're like, that's why we're changing. That's why we're looking at a new system. Or somebody says, well, I hear you, but it'll never work. Like, you can do it, but it just won't work. What does that, and then you have to turn and become a salesperson. All of us project managers are salespeople, because we know what we need to get done and we need other people to help us. And so we need to get them on board and engaged so that we can both have that positive outcome. And that's where I like this cross-functional teams collaborative diagram is a way of pulling together all those 5 areas, because you don't just do first, I think about how I'm aligned, and then am I communicating, and then am I bringing everybody together, and I'm stressing, and then I make a decision. It's all connected. And so what this 3-step process is, especially for some of those difficult conversations, maybe when you want to borrow resources from somebody, what is the conversation that you actually want to have? Where we're just talking about that conversation or the communication. What is it that you want to get out? What the absolute root cause is might be 4 W's down. So think about what is the conversation you actually want to have. And then you might have 8 items that you would love to walk away with. Shopping list success. But you're not going to get all 8. So what about are the top 2 or 3 that if you could walk away, with those top 2 or 3 items, that you're just going to put your stake in the ground and really, I hate to use the word fight, but push for those. The 3rd step is empathy, because all too often we start our thinking. We know what we want. We know what we're going to go to the mat for. And then we start to think about, what does the other person want? Well, you're not in their head. Remember, you can't change anybody else's perception. But if you're paying attention, if you start to show some empathy for some of their challenges, think about what are the fears and threats that they want to protect. Then you go in the meeting with, well, I need this to happen, and I know you don't want this to happen. And you go into that meeting and you probably don't say, well, I know you don't want this to happen, but you can frame that conversation so they realize that you're really on a team together. And you get to have that win-win conversation as opposed to that either or win-lose situation. And once you start helping each other and you both have buy-in, all of a sudden you have two different departments working together that can share resources. But you don't know that till you get together. I was working on a global team, and I was providing trainers to write the pilot beta courseware. It was a global software company. And I kept saying, I had to make airplane reservations. I had to arrange schedules. And John just would never, he wasn't committing. And I was running out of time. I'd have to put those people on another project. And finally, he got exasperated and he said, the software won't be ready. I said, what do you mean it's behind? I said, how much? He said, 8 months. I was like, what? Well, it turns out that he didn't have budget for testers. The reason it was going to take so long is he wouldn't be able to hire people to test the software. I said, my trainers know how to, they were in the field, they use that software. The old version, could they test the new version? He went, well, yes. And I said, well, I don't have any travel money. He said, I have travel money. And we got that product out. It was 1 week, which I think is on time, when we went from 8 months to 1 week, simply because we put our cards on the table. So there's a little bit of trust in there. And that's finally, as we come to the end, when we talk about emotional intelligence, standing on one foot, just like we had, 45 minutes here, pay attention. Be respectful, model mutual respect, listen to understand, ask lots and lots of questions. And then that will help you achieve that collaboration to strive for. So I should ask, do we have a little bit of time for questions?
Let me check the queue, see if there's anything has popped up. Susan?
Pardon me, I'm fighting a cold.
No other questions have come in.
Really? Well, let's see. I should ask some questions. How many of you think I should ask? Can I see hand raises? How many of you are afraid to ask somebody for help? How many of you feel like you just have to do everything yourself?
Lewis mentioned he's thinking of the Scrum values, so thinking agile. In what you presented today, another reply, I ask for help every day.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Because I was going to say, one of the reasons to ask for help, I was just working with a small group in a small company, and I came up and talked about asking for help, and everybody looked at the IT guy. And the question is, if you're afraid to ask for help, do you want to go on vacation? Do you want to get a promotion? Very true. Because if you ask for help and people, you can kind of train them to do that task, then you can go on vacation and not spend your whole vacation on the telephone, because you have support. And if you also are the only person who can do a task, then you're so busy being busy, when it comes time to promote somebody, you won't be considered because nobody else can do your job. You're way too important. So, looking at asking for help and being able to delegate effectively is really one of your best skills to develop and will really keep you on a moving career path.
Yeah. Erica commented, I ask for help and others' opinions regularly.
Wonderful.
Caitlin says, I ask for help every day. I decided not to bring any shame into the equation. How else to learn?
What a positive, great attitude.
Mm-hmm. And then Brian also commented, I do both, depending on the task.
That's true. That's true. And it is a matter because one solution does not fit every situation. It's just like we talk about micromanaging. Well, if, there are levels of micromanagement, sometimes you do need, especially with a lot of new people or new people to the team, you need to check in a little more often.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Susan. It looks like there's no other comments or questions that came in. To the audience, we will share out Susan's presentation to you. Just to note that realize today that the Lunch and Learn for May had not been shared, so we'll get that out to the audience team members as well. Great information. A few others said thank you, great information, great Lunch and Learn.
Oh, well, thank you.
So very positive feedback to you, Susan. And we do appreciate your time, taking the time out of, I'm sure, a busy day. Do you have a contact information if somebody wants to contact you? I think I saw it on either the first or the last slide.
I'll give it to you. I'm just popping my LinkedIn up really, really quickly.
Okay.
Why won't it click up on me?
Very thought-provoking. A couple of them have said.
Oh, thank you. I see it. I will pop. Just give me one moment. I'm balancing slides and it didn't do what I wanted it to do. And I can put my, here we go. I see I'm looking for where my chat is. There's chat. So that's my LinkedIn.
Okay.
If you prefer to send me an email.
And then I did have this from what you'd shared with me earlier as well.
Right.
And then you can see in the chat her LinkedIn, Susan's LinkedIn page, as well as her email.
And do reach out and, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have a question, do email me.
Yep.
You can never have too many friends. And I really encourage you to volunteer with your PMI chapter because it's a great way for networking and for meeting people and getting new experiences.
Absolutely. Thanks again for the plug. All right, with that, we will end the session for today. Thanks again, Susan. Thank you for all the attendees. George, thanks for the help as well. And we will chat with you all. We are going to have a July Lunch and Learn, so we'll chat with hopefully many of you during the July. Thanks so much. Take care.